Well, folks, our universities and entertainment industry have been completely overrun by some of the worst people in America. Joining us on the line to discuss it is Jeff Rabhan. He's former chairman of the Clive Institute of Recorded Music at New York University, and he's worked in virtually all areas of the music and entertainment industry. The reason that we're having Jeff on today is, of course, because of his work at NYU and the problems that Jews are having on campus with anti-Semitism. Jeff, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Pat. Glad to be here.
So obviously, NYU has actually been the site of some of the most controversial situations regarding the current conflict. The student president of the Bar Association at NYU School of Law was filmed taking down posters of kidnapped children, issued a letter directly after the attacks by Hamas, suggesting that that was all the fault of the Jews. How prominent, you were working at NYU, obviously, for a long time. How prominent is anti-Semitism on campus, and how is the administration supposed to deal with it?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. If you take a step back and you look, there's a perfect storm that occurred going back to a combination of BLM and COVID that created a perfect storm where students across the country no longer were students. They became customers. Universities were so afraid of losing money and so afraid of losing students and so afraid of upsetting students that were on campus, having spent hundreds of millions of dollars, many of them, to follow protocols and what have you. It created an environment where students were empowered to think that anything they said and did was acceptable behavior, and schools didn't push back, from elite institutions to community colleges. And so what you have is it's a level of tolerance that we've never seen before. Universities have always been a great place for free speech and free thinking and for meaningful debate. But as the rhetoric and the vitriol has gotten more angry and more vicious and more hateful, they oftentimes are handcuffed and afraid to actually speak up. I do know there are students at NYU that are afraid to go to class at this point. They don't feel empowered to speak. They're being shouted down. Students are going into classes at GW, at Stanford, at Harvard. And the universities are all very slow to act when most of them have mandates in their charters stating that hate speech is not allowed and it's cause for instant expulsion.
It is really impressive how the left-wing movement to legitimize anti-Zionism has provided this extraordinary cover for anti-Semitism, where so long as you're shouting from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, which means the extermination of Jews. So long as you don't say exterminate the Jews, you just say get rid of the Jewish state in this entire area and kill all the Jews in it by proxy. As long as you say it the right way, administrations at these universities pretend that this is just kind of normal political argumentation as opposed to the anti-Semitism it actually is. These universities are extremely sensitive about discrimination or racism in any other form. When it comes to anti-Semitism, they seem to get incredibly shy. Why do you think that is?
Well, what ended up happening after, the COVID BLM movement is universities invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into the equity, inclusion, and belonging divisions of their schools. And that really covered a lot of the LGBTQ plus community to make sure that everybody felt that's safe and at home. Some of these institutions have 50, 60 people in those divisions, more than the political science department. And I guess what has ended up happening is, I've heard you say before in the past that, your child is stupid, not because, not smart for the age, but, inexperienced. And what's happened is when you take these emotionally flawed arguments and you pair it with a generation of kids at these institutions who all want to see the baby. They're just not interested in the labor pains. What you have is a failure of these institutions to educate appropriately, meaning you may be for a two-state solution. You may be very interested in Middle East politics, but you cannot equate supporting Hamas with appropriate behavior, meaning there is no moral side to murdering and taking hostages. There's only one side to that argument. And I believe that institutions are afraid to stand up. We used to hear from university presidents all the time. This has been a fumble drill across the country at these quote unquote elite institutions, some of them sending out 2-3 messages. And I have found it to be remarkably incoherent to decipher exactly where any of these institutions stand, which has only empowered a generation of inexperienced, emotional, flawed young people who have their feelings, but once again, feelings aren't facts, as I've heard you say over and over.
The October 15th tax deadline has just passed. I know many of you might be dreading the stress of filing your taxes. Filing those taxes can be a long, excruciating process, but if you fail to file, you'll start to pile penalties on your tax debt. That's why you need to check out Tax Network USA. The team at Tax Network USA has a track record of success. They've reduced tax debts for numerous clients totaling over $1 billion. Whether you're looking at $10,000 or $1 million tax debt, they can help you with a settlement. Doesn't matter if you haven't filed in a year, 5 years, even a whole decade. Tax Network USA is equipped to secure the best settlement for you. Their expert attorneys and tax professionals can help resolve all tax cases no matter how they started. Don't let tax debt control your life any longer. Take the first step to resolving your tax issues by visiting taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. That's taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro. Today, again, tax debt can totally destroy you. If you let it get out of control, it can take over your life. It can wreck your life for decades. So why not get it back under control by visiting taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro and get in touch with their expert attorneys and tax professionals who can help resolve your tax case with the IRS and fix your life. Get it back on track. taxnetworkusa.com/Shapiro to get started. We do things very differently here at Daily Wire. We host a lot of huge podcasts, of course. We launched a chocolate company overnight. We're constantly growing. We're constantly expanding. Well, this is why we rely on ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter makes your whole hiring process faster and easier. Their powerful technology works for you to identify people whose skills and experience match your job. ZipRecruiter saves you time by letting you easily invite your top candidates to apply to your job, so they're more likely to apply sooner. ZipRecruiter is trusted by millions of people. In fact, over 3.8 million businesses trust ZipRecruiter with their hiring needs. Make a positive impact on your hiring future with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter will get a quality candidate within day one. Again, we're constantly hiring. We're constantly growing here at Daily Wire. We rely extremely heavily on ZipRecruiter.com. You can do the same. Head on over to ZipRecruiter.com/DailyWire. Try ZipRecruiter for free. Again, that is ZipRecruiter.com/DAILYWIRE. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. You should try it. You should use it the same way that we do. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Instead, use ZipRecruiter.com/DailyWire to find the world's best employees. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. I mean, doesn't a lot of this just boil down to the simple fact that a lot of Jews thought for a long time that they were part of the intersectional coalition? They just aren't. And so the fact is that if Jews are assaulted on campus or if people are screaming genocidal things about Jews on campus, well, the Jews aren't really victims because just as Whoopi Goldberg once suggested, the Jews are basically white people. And so white people are not victims in the United States of America. And because white people are not victims in the United States of America or really anywhere on earth, that means that if you have a conflict between quote unquote brown people, which is how it's seen on college campuses in terms of Palestinians, and white people in terms of Jews, never mind that a huge number of Jews are actually brown in Israel. They're from Arab countries. That because of that false binary that's been created, the universities are deeply afraid of offending the quote-unquote intersectional coalition by siding with the victims of other members of the intersectional coalition.
That's 100% right. And I've actually made the point on numerous occasions that Jews are not white and genetically are not white. And, what's ended up happening is oftentimes in these cases, most universities don't give financial aid to international students. And many of them do have major investments from Arab nations, not only for campuses, but for many, many other things. And schools are very, very weary of interfering with that dollar. Many are tuition based and require that money in order to, continue to evolve and grow and make their own investments and build new buildings and all the things that they like to do. But I also feel like, Jews have allowed themselves to be victims in these places. Jews need to speak louder and talk louder. And just like Bill Ackman's done at Harvard, there are a lot of names on a lot of these institutions that were major donations were made by Jewish Americans who not only supported the growth of this country and the growth of industry and the growth of other minority groups, but they've continued to hire and support these schools. And the only way to bring Jews back to a place where they aren't feeling like victims or waiting for people to come and help is to pull support and to not hire these people and to not hire the graduates and to stop donating money, because the only way you hurt any institution is by hurting their ranking and by hurting their endowments and their graduates. And people will have to educate themselves and realize that it's not okay to make these false equivalencies between a political statement and hate.
So, Jeff, you also work obviously a lot in the music industry, the entertainment industry. The kind of split in the entertainment industry on this one has been astonishing to watch. There are some people who came out and signed a letter obviously suggesting that Hamas is in the wrong, which would seem pretty obvious, and that hostages should be released. A lot of those people took actually flack for doing that. Jordan Peele online was taking flack for having signed that letter. Meanwhile, you had another letter that was put out by the likes of Alyssa Milano, Jon Stewart, calling for a ceasefire, which of course would benefit only Hamas at this point. What is the prevailing mood in Hollywood and in the entertainment industry, the people who consider themselves our moral exemplars?
I think historically, the entertainment industry has made an appalling showing in support of Israel and support of Jews. I think many of them are afraid of upsetting the talent, upsetting the stars, upsetting the stockholders. A good friend of mine, Shirley Halpern, just wrote a great letter. She's the editor of Los Angeles Magazine now, but she wrote a great letter on Puck, calling for an end to the silence. And once again, there is a fear among successful Jewish Americans, not only in industry but in families, to speak up in support of themselves, and that has to stop. Because every time we see an incident, another temple shot up, another community destroyed, it's always an 80-year-old grandmother crying outside of the shul. And what we need to see is the strength in numbers of the people who can actually affect the change. And instead of sitting silent, it went almost 2 weeks before anybody from the music industry came out and said something. President of Atlantic Records, Kevin Weaver, said something. And then finally, Mr. Davis followed a week later. They all should have been in lockstep. And unfortunately, same with the film industry. Very, very slow to move and act and change because they don't want to upset anyone. Just like NYU doesn't want to upset the student, they don't want to upset the foreign investor, they don't want to upset the donor. You can't be on both sides of a moral issue.
Well, that is Jeff Rabhan. He's the former chairman of the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at New York University. Jeff, thanks so much for your time and your insight. Really appreciate it.
Ben, thank you.
Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.